What it is, cucks, it's your boy the Hater. Hater on the road up in this piece. Today we're going to talk about the Goldberg and Asuka situation, alright? For those of you that don't know, Goldberg in some podcast or something, he made a comment about Asuka. Well, it wasn't really about her, it was about his streak, right? So he was saying how, like, WWE beat his streak. They had, like, Asuka beat his streak. And I guess the controversy is that he referred to Asuka as some girl, right? Even though, like, immediately after, he was like, I don't have anything against her, you know? But he's like, they did it on purpose, yeah? This is, like, something that everybody obviously knows is true, right? It's the same thing that WWE does all the time with various other accolades, right? Brock Lesnar becomes the youngest WWE champion of all time. He leaves the company. So Randy Orton becomes the youngest world heavyweight champion of all time right after him. It's not a coincidence. You know what I mean? WWE seeks to have all records be current records. You see what I'm saying? Same thing with Ric Flair. His record being beaten by Cena. WWE wants to pretend that the best time to be a WWE fan is right now. And I don't blame them for it. You know what I mean? Like, it's a fake sport, so why wouldn't they give it to Asuka, you know? But the problem here is Goldberg got all this flack. Of course, people started presuming that he doesn't respect, like, women's wrestling or doesn't respect Asuka, which, quite frankly, why should he? You know what I mean? It's not a real sport. Keep that in mind, right? Asuka did not achieve something when they let her beat 175 women, or whatever the fuck it was, whatever the record is. You know what I mean? Now, neither did Goldberg, of course. But the idea is the why behind it. See what I'm saying? It has nothing to do with what happened, because shit happens. But the idea was they didn't want Goldberg to have this record. Now, again, the record is a make-believe record, but it nevertheless is something that identifies with Goldberg. And clearly, something that Goldberg identifies with as well. So with that being said, when they choose Asuka to replace Goldberg, I don't think Goldberg really cares if it's Asuka or if it was like Alba Fire or if it was Nia Jax. Nobody cares. Even if it was like The Rock. The point is, they did it in order to remove Goldberg's contribution, dare I say, but his moniker, right? It's the same thing with Brock Lesnar. If they wanted another person to be the youngest world heavyweight champion, I don't think it would matter if it's Randy Orton or John Cena or, Rene Dupree, for all we care about. The idea is that it's no longer Brock Lesnar, right? Brock Lesnar is no longer the guy that is the youngest WWE champion of all time. I mean, he still is because Orton won the other title, but you know what I mean, right? He's not the youngest world champion of all time in any capacity. That's why they later on had to give him something else. The guy that broke the streak. That's something that cannot be replaced. But with that being said, the issue here isn't even Asuka, because she responded. And her response was actually pretty cool. It was pretty tame. She was like, I don't take any offense to it. He's allowed to have his opinion. And she was saying how, like, she doesn't care about the streak. Asuka gets it. She's an intelligent woman, clearly. Like, she's saying, like, I care more about what wrestling is like after I leave versus how it was before I left. That is actually a measurable difference. So, for example, if wrestling draws 1 million people, and then, Felipe Escalante comes into wrestling, and by the time he's done, wrestling has 2 million viewers, and it's because of him, and most people agree that it's because of him, well, then he's had a net positive impact. Asuka is on that same wavelength. Now, Asuka's impact will never be that of Goldberg. And I think this is the part that kind of underpins this entire scenario, right? Going back to my first ever video game review, my first serious one with Pokemon Legends, it's the same philosophy, right? People don't like when things that they don't want to happen, right? You can say that about Goldberg. You can say it about the fans, too. The fans expect Goldberg to appreciate that Asuka beat his record, right? They expect him to shut the fuck up and not speak out of turn. Because this is the world that we live in. And we're talking about the Reddit wrestling fans here, right? We're talking about the internet wrestling community, which are all a bunch of soft-ass pussies. That's just the fact. The reality is that people nowadays are too complaining, and they have no idea on how to have normal discourse. A nice conversation could be had about this, right? Did Asuka deserve it? It would be a bullshit, meaningless conversation, but it could be nice nevertheless. People could come together and say, well, I think Goldberg shouldn't have had his streak be removed because it's iconic and because Goldberg's Goldberg. And some people could say, well, if someone was going to, beat the streak, it's good that it was a woman. It goes hand in hand with their idea of parody and everything else, right? So good, You could have had the conversation, but instead, the butthurt and wrestling neckbeards, who I blame entirely for the fall of wrestling, they have an opinion on this too. A lot of people were like, oh, Goldberg sucks. He's not half the worker Asuka is. Like, these people are so dumb, right? They started watching wrestling when Daniel Bryan became champion, and they think that wrestling is all about who can work better. First of all, Goldberg could work 100 times better than Asuka, because Goldberg, more importantly than anything else, was believable, right? Like, every man that Goldberg has wrestled is believable as someone that can be destroyed by Goldberg, right? Even like the Big Show, even Kevin Nash, even Lesnar, it is believable. Now, is it likely? Absolutely not. Obviously, Big Show would beat his ass. Obviously, Brock Lesnar would beat his ass. But it doesn't matter. It's believable. You can't say the same thing about Asuka. As a matter of fact, when she's out there beating these broads, you know, she's beating some people that are like clearly bigger and stronger than her. I'm talking about your Bianca Belairs. I'm talking about your Charlottes. She beat everybody, I think. Maybe she didn't beat Charlotte. I don't remember what the timeline is like. But she beat a lot of people that would one day become bigger deals than they were back then, right? And she's a big deal, and good for her. But the facts are the facts. Fundamentally, it's not reasonable to suggest that Asuka can go that long without being defeated. It was already a stretch when Goldberg did it. Nobody has those types of records in the real world. Nobody is like 175-0. It doesn't matter who you are. Even if like Mike Tyson fights like 175 regular guys, odds are one of them is going to get lucky and beat him. You know what I mean? This is the problem with a lot of fans and the way that sports work in the eyes of the fans, right? Upsets happen all the time. But the idea is that even when an upset happens, everybody is like so close in skill. Not always. Sometimes legit upsets happen. A great example would be George St. Pierre and Matt Serra. Matt Serra knocked out George St. Pierre. This is something that like, it is like a 1 in 1,000, right? If George St. Pierre and Matt Serra fight 1,000 times, George St. Pierre at that time would win almost all of them. But once in a while, the other guy wins. That's why it's unrealistic to go like, 200-0. Even you could take literally anyone you could think of. John Jones, like he's the greatest of all time. He's won like 35 fights or whatever the fuck it is, Very impressive, don't get me wrong. Going 50-0 like Mayweather did is very impressive. And that's the idea. The idea is it doesn't matter who you fight. If you fight 50 times, you have to be exceptional to win 50 times. Think about it this way. How many times has an NBA team gone 82-0? Exactly, right? It's impossible. There have been teams that are all-time teams, like Golden State. That one year where they like broke the record or whatever, they had like 70 wins or something, right? Even they lost, and they probably lost to some bullshit team like the Bulls or something, you know what I mean? It doesn't mean anything. Anyone can be beaten on any given day. Even in football, where the season is extremely short compared to other sports, it's impossible for someone to have a perfect season. In fact, no one has had a perfect season and then gone on to win the Super Bowl. Nobody's gone completely undefeated, as far as I know, at least in the modern era. It's very difficult to do. The idea is this. You could have LeBron play against like a very capable college player in basketball, and LeBron in his prime would win like 900 out of 1,000 games. The college guy's gonna beat him once or twice, right? Nobody is that elite. See what I'm saying? And that's why the record is silly. Now, if you're gonna give it to somebody, you give it to like a Brock Lesnar or a Goldberg, because some things are just facts. But even that, even like if Brock Lesnar and, Andrade got into a fight, right? I think everybody knows that Lesnar would destroy Andrade. But 1 out of 1,000 times, Andrade might go for like a donkey punch and knock him out, Anything's possible. That's the idea, right? So if someone were to beat someone 1,000 times, it would be insane. Even if it's like the strongest guy versus the weakest guy. It's insane. Unless it's a sport of like actual, physicality, and there's no defense and there's no actual variables. Like, for example, if me and Mark Henry bench press like 1,000 times, he's beating me 1,000 times. He's just stronger than I am, right? But if it's anything else, I have a shot. Do I have a good shot? No. But in wrestling, you're not supposed to be fighting jobbers, right? Like Mark Henry, like Brock Lesnar can beat my ass 1,000 times out of 1,000. I have basically no chance. One time, I might like just throw a punch and it just hits, because he just gets distracted. And even then, I probably would have no chance. But you understand what I'm saying? But in a sport where it's like, like a league system where there's some parity, the idea is it's almost impossible to beat everyone, right? Even in soccer, where ties don't count as defeats. Like, even that is a feat in and of itself. It happens like once every blue moon, you know? So what I'm getting at here is Asuka's response was good. It's the fans that really believe that Asuka shouldn't have this kind of capacity, right? And that nobody should challenge her at all. That basically everyone's supposed to be okay with Asuka beating Goldberg's record. No, motherfuckers, I'm not okay with it. I think it's a bad idea. The more intelligent thing to do would be to give Asuka some other record. Maybe she wins like 100 matches in a row or something more modest, or 30 matches in a row, just by submitting people, right? Or like, remember when Baron Corbin had like the short-lived gimmick where he would just squash jobbers in under like 20 seconds? That was great. That stood out. It made him seem important, right? The match would start, he would just kick somebody, end of days, that would be it. You know, it was awesome. It really made the guy feel like a big deal. The idea was like, nobody can beat this guy. Yeah, he's beating jobbers, but he's beating them in 20 seconds. And then they had to have like a, you know, competitive match with like Bull Dempsey that he wins in like 10 minutes. And you're like, okay, fine, I understand Bull Dempsey's like a member of the roster. You know, maybe you don't want to like have him get squashed in 15 seconds, but he could take a loss in 1 minute, you know? Like, that would have been smart if you wanted to push Baron Corbin, and we saw how that went. The idea is that Goldberg, if he's upset, he's not upset at Asuka. He's upset at the WWE's choice to continuously screw him over, you know, to diminish his legacy. At the end of the day, Goldberg has a lot of years ahead of him. Now, I don't think he'd be able to make a lot of money by saying, I'm the guy that one time, like, won this many matches in a row. But it's unclear. Maybe he wanted to, like, make a shirt out of it or something. Maybe he wanted to monetize this, and now it's no longer something that is viable, right? Again, I'm just speculating. That's not the important part. The idea is this is something that he identifies with, right? Just like the streak is something that the Undertaker player identifies with. You know what I mean? It's not necessarily true that the Undertaker's gonna like monetize this one way or another, but there would be like, it would leave a sour taste in many people's mouths if, for example, the Undertaker player, if instead of like him being known as the guy with the WrestleMania streak, like let's say like, I don't know, fucking Carmen Petrovich wins her first 20 WrestleMania matches. It's never gonna happen, of course, but let's say she does, right? You know, it's like, wait a second, that's kind of fucked up, you know? And in many ways, that would be something that's like reasonable. Asuka did not win all those matches televised, right? That would take like 5 years. So there you have it. I mean, at least I don't think so. So the idea is, like, these are like bullshit records that someone associates with, and you ruined their record just so you could say you ruined their record, right? I mean, not just to say that, but to basically paint the idea that this record now belongs to somebody else. So it's understandable that Goldberg would be a bit ticked off, you know? But the fans, the way they reacted, you'd think someone like fucked their mother in front of them and then hit her with a jackhammer. So once again, the fans ruin everything, and once again, we can't have anything nice. Everything was going well until the fans came and ruined this too. Cucksters.